Turkey.
Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Far Cry Primal.
Darsh Urki shawi wapatash. Dash Urki shawi wapatash.
This review will have major spoilers for the plot, so if that's an issue, skip to the end. I really have to hand it to Ubisoft. They've been going all out with trying some really different ideas for many of their games, and this is especially so for Far Cry Primal. In a time when the first-person shooter genre is overcrowded with zombies and science fiction, Ubisoft decided to try something fairly insane and put the player in the shoes of prehistoric man. Do cavemen wear shoes? Moccasins? Maybe sandals? In any case, the game takes place in prehistoric times where saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths roam the earth. This is an absolutely gorgeous game. Take this clip as an example. The forest you see in front of me here is fully practical. I can go down the cliffside and wander in amongst all of those trees. I can hunt woolly rhinos or tame jaguars or wrestle giant crocodiles. Regardless of this game's repetitiveness or over-reliance on hunting and gathering as game mechanics, this is a technological achievement unlike many others I've seen, and for that alone this game is well worth a try. While this game is part of the Far Cry franchise and uses many of the same mechanics as Far Cry's 3 and 4, this is one of those cases where the details lead to a wildly different gameplay experience and, as a result, wildly different levels of mature content. I'll get into the violence in a bit, but I want to cover the other mature content first and then come back to it. Sexuality is basically non-existent in this game. However, there is some female toplessness. Some of the female Udam have their chest exposed, but this is pretty easy to miss since they're somewhat commonly present in the Udam villages, but rarely seen outside that. More prominently, though, is Batari, the leader of the Izila tribe, who is topless despite her blue body paint. There is no sex in this game, though, so sexuality doesn't extend any farther than what you've just seen. Substance use is a bit of a different matter. While all of the Far Cry games allow the player to use various herbs and spices to heal and apply extra effects to help with combat or hunting, Far Cry Primal includes a witch doctor as one of the main characters. This doctor's medicines frequently include mixtures of blood, dirt, herbs of a questionable sort, and sometimes an eyeball or two. Takar, the main character, drinks these brews and goes on trips that would make the Grateful Dead envious. These are pretty much an unavoidable part of the game, and while they may not be the modern form of narcotics, they are definitely a caveman-appropriate analog. Alright, now for the violence. As I mentioned before, Ubisoft embraced the idea of the hunter-gatherer wholeheartedly in this game, so much of my playtime was spent picking plants or hunting animals. But whatever time wasn't spent in those mostly innocuous pursuits was instead spent in hunting every tribesman. And Takar is extremely good at hunting. While the firearms in previous Far Cry games meant that most of the combat was engaged at a decent distance with only the occasional melee kill up close, Primal is almost the exact opposite. The bow is a decent enough weapon, but it's not nearly as silent as it seems, and the damage and accuracy leave much to be desired. As a result, I found that rushing in close to perform melee takedowns with a knife or spear was a much more effective method for taking down opponents of all classes. While the early game encouraged me to take the slower, stealthier, safer approach, by the middle of my playthrough I was getting takedown after takedown, instantly killing enemies in sometimes horrifically brutal ways. What you're seeing right now is extremely common for the late game combat. Gore is also included in parts of the environment as well. While dismembered portions of animals of all sizes are included deep in the Udam and Izila territories, the deepest sections of Udam territory also included dismembered and disemboweled pieces of humans, usually impaled on spikes to mark territory. There were a few cutscenes and scripted events that highlighted violence as well. For example, there is a scene where an Udam begs Takar to puncture his skull and allow the brain fire to cool in the air, which Takar agrees to and does with a knife. Even more noteworthy is a scene after the player defeats Batari. In this scene, Takar grabs Batari and holds her over a raging fire as she begs for her gods to scorch Takar. Her gods remain silent, and the player gets to watch as she is burnt alive to a crisp. In my Doom review, I talk about how the brutality of the game was more than just appropriate for the game, it was a necessary part of it. This is doubly true for Primal. The violence and brutal nature highlight the savagery of the tribal warfare and the uncivilized nature of humanity at this point. And while the entire game is narrated in a fictional language, there is definitely character development here that adds to the contrast between modern codes of conduct and ethics and the lack thereof in these tribes. The Udam are a race on the decline, marred by disease, but still thirsting for the strength that they had decades ago. And despite the Ezila's mastery of fire, they are still outclassed by the speed, strength, and intelligence of Takar and his Wenja tribe. This is a story about the earliest Homo sapiens clawing their way to the top, struggling to survive and thrive in an environment that is both filled with wonder and beauty, and filled with threats and danger. That being said, as a result of the violence and gore, we gave this game a recommended age of 18 years old. I want to thank Urki profusely for allowing me to test the new allegedly bear-proof body armor and the wingsuit made of bird feathers and leather strips. The Patreon poll for next month's user-picked game is up, so check out the Patreon page if you want to vote in that. Team Fortress 2 and Mafia 3 are coming up next, so keep an eye out for those coming soon.